This may be the most important 10 minutes we've spent together in a long time. I'm going to take you through a lot of weird sounding names and groups today, and you might be wondering, what does this have to do with me? Why should I care about what is happening over in Europe with some far right or far left group? I'm going to begin to lay the groundwork to tell you that everything that is going on in Europe right now is all part of a larger coordinated plan, and it is being guided by specific people. This is no conspiracy theory. I want you to do your own homework because nobody in the press will. You can find all of this at your local library and online from credible sources. Not only that, the United States has also been targeted by this same group, and they are actively following a global plan to influence the government and to tear us apart. Does that worry you? One last thing. What I'm going to show you is about the far right and conservative movement. This is the European far right. This is the Nazi far right. This is not a constitutional small government people. But I'm warning you, if we are not the ones who are calling this out, you will be infiltrated here in the United States. You won't know, and they will blame this on conservatives. And what's coming, I believe, is very bad. Let's start at the rise of the far right in both Europe and the United States. We've been hearing it for several years now, but the individuals and the groups are always reported on individually. For example, the far right in Germany and what their goals are. The far right in France, what is it that they want? Yesterday, I told you about the identitarian movement and how things started to really come together for me quickly when I saw this movement #120DB. They are weaponizing real issues to focus rage. And there are two questions. Are these groups acting independently? And if not, where are they getting their central guidance? I was one of the first to point out exactly 3 years ago this month on Russian support for far-right and left groups in Europe. I also told you at the time they were going to infiltrate and try to influence our media and tear us apart from the inside. This not only included advice and guidance, but cold, hard cash. 3 years ago, we told you that. We also pointed out that France's National Front receives 9 million euros from the Kremlin. The leader of Greece's Golden Dawn received handwritten notes from Kremlin advisors while he was in jail. Every influential extreme party in Europe appears to be connected to Russia in some way or another. A few months after I first aired the show on Russian support for these groups, a gathering took place in St. Petersburg, Russia. It was called the International Russian Conservative Forum, and most people didn't pay any attention to it. It was a gathering of fringe political activists from all over the world. They were all in attendance. But from that meeting was born the World National Conservative Movement. It's a rather large movement now. In the last 3 years, it now encompasses 28 countries and 60-plus groups and growing rapidly. Their specific goal was to support radical activists and politicians all over the world, both financially and, see if this sounds familiar, through an aggressive media, social media, and internet troll campaign. Ever since that meeting, the WNCM has acted like the International Tides Foundation for the far right. However, as dangerous as I thought the Tides Foundation was to our constitutional republic, this is a threat to the entire world. This is the new Nazi movement. Their membership boasts, as I said, over 60 groups. And if you look at the web of influence, they are quite literally everywhere. And they have been prepping for what we are seeing right now over the last 3 years. Slovakia, Thailand, Spain, Syria, Serbia, Poland, Romania, Sweden, Mongolia, the EU, Bulgaria, Chile, Cyprus, Denmark, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Italy, Japan, they're all over the world. The movement I spoke about yesterday, the identitarian movement and generation identity, is only one of the foot soldiers in this massive campaign. Invitations like this one went out to Jim Dowson. He's the founder of UK's Britain's First Party. And they were sent out to anyone that had a group that might answer the call to arms. Similar invitations went out to several Americans, including Jared Taylor of American Renaissance, who was one of the founding partners who attended the conference. Taylor has been very, very vocal about white supremacists. He's a white supremacist, been very vocal about it for years here in the United States. And Taylor shares a connection with Richard Spencer. We know Richard Spencer. He is America's new favorite Nazi. The two of them tried hard to organize a conference in Hungary that was banned at the last minute. And Spencer, the de facto leader of the alt-right, was arrested in Budapest and kicked out of the country. Then another ally, both of Richard Spencer and Jared Taylor, is this guy, Preston Wigginton. He invited Spencer to speak at Texas A&M University, one of the up-and-coming rising stars in the alt-right movement. And all three men were present and assuming leadership roles in Charlottesville. These three men. Spencer was leading the torchlit marches. Wigginton was donning the military-style helmet, and Taylor was in disguise, dressed as a curly-headed Frenchman at a meeting with other prominent white supremacists. All three of these men have one thing in common: connections to this, the World National Conservative Movement and their main ideologue, the guy who's really the puppet master, Aleksandr Dugin. Look, I know this is going to, the people on the right now are going to say, oh, Glenn Beck's conspiracy theorist. This is not a conspiracy. And if you would read this man's book, you would understand. Richard Spencer's alt-right blog is littered with Dugin's sermons and his theories. His wife is Dugin's translator. This guy's wife is the official English translator of this guy. She has devoted her life to translating all of his works into English. The conference that Jared Taylor and Spencer were organizing in Hungary was supposed to be keynoted by Aleksandr Dugin. And Preston Wigginton and the young rising star had Dugin host a lecture via Skype at Texas A&M. Dugin also recorded a speech titled "To My American Friends in Our Common Struggle" for a nationalist conference organized by Heimbeck recently in California. As I said earlier, Jared Taylor was also at the initial WNCM conference back in 2015. You can literally play 6 degrees of Aleksandr Dugin with any of the established far-right groups, both in Europe, throughout Europe, and the rest of the world, including here in America. Richard Spencer, in a recent blog post on altright.com, interviewed the leader of Austria's Generation Identity groups. Remember, Generation Identity is one of the founding WNCM groups. In that interview, the Austrian said that 2 men are the brainchild of this movement. Alan de Benoist, and this is not going to seem important to you now, but he is the author of the idea that it's okay to be a pagan because the original people in France were pagans. That is going to become important in the next few weeks as we go over this. Please remember that. Now, it's easy to see why he was mentioned. He's a Frenchman. He's been talking about national identity, opposition to globalization ever since the 1970s. He actually coined the term European New Right. But Dugin, this guy and Dugin. The Austrian activist even goes as far as to say that Dugin's book, The Fourth Political Theory, is very important to the movement. It is the Mein Kampf of this movement. If Benoist was the grandfather to the current far-right movement, then Dugin was the one that took it and gave it direction. He weaponized the European New Right and the American alt-right with his own political philosophy. Marxists believed that the proletariat would awaken and become class conscious. This would bring the fourth and inevitable struggle between the bourgeois and the proletariat. Similarly, Dugin wants not only the Russians, but all of Europe to become aware of their race and their identity to bring forth racial struggles. Does any of this sound familiar? He wants to do it to fracture Western society, which is why the left also wants to do it. This is what the Russians ultimately want. Dugin's first book, Foundations of Geopolitics, laid out a Russian plan to reclaim the influence they lost after the collapse of the Soviet Union. There were two main pillars: an alliance with Germany, Japan, and Iran, and encouraging racial and ethnic tensions within the Western alliances to break them apart. Dugin's next book, The Fourth Political Theory, would provide the manifesto for people like Richard Spencer, the rest of the American alt-right, and the radical groups springing up all over Europe. If you think that Dugin and the world national conservative movement are entirely separate from the Russian government, consider that Dugin's books are now required reading at the Russian General Staff Academy, both the book on geopolitics and the alt-right manifesto. This is the Russian project, and it has to be one of the largest intelligence active measures in human history. They're organized, they're dedicated, and we're not even close to focusing on what's really going on. This is way beyond our current investigation into Hillary Clinton and to Donald Trump. This is really important. This is the early stage of the Nazi movement. We are going to have radicals on the right and radicals on the left. And the good people who don't want either side of it have got to know this stuff. My hope is that Mueller and the intelligence community are already on this trail. But who knows? Time is running out.